Hello, welcome to Taxpayer Alert. I'm Al Segalla. I'll be your host at this show, and also I'm president of the Calaveras County Taxpayer Association. Our website, which is calaveras.taxpayers.org, will have a YouTube link for this program as well as 50 other programs, and you're so welcome to join us. Well, these programs we feature interesting people, and in this session is no different. Our guest is Cliff Edson, Supervisor and also Chair of the Board of Supervisors, Calaveras County. Welcome.
Thank you, Al.
All right. So you got into this business. You're restaurant. You own a restaurant, and you happen to make the best mushroom omelets I've ever tasted. I'm not sure if you cooked it.
No, that'd be my wonderful wife right there.
But I ate it, and it was really good. And that's Cliff's Country Cafe.
Country Cliffs.
Country Cliffs in San Andreas.
Yes.
And then in addition to that, you're doing a great job as running the Board of Supervisors.
Thank you.
Especially such a cloudy time with the fire and all the different things going on. And it's amazing that you have the resources to be able to run these meetings so well.
Well, thanks, Al.
One of the things that is we probably want to discuss, the biggest event that happened is the fire. Mm-hmm. And you've been right in the middle of that, and you've been trying to do everything you can to have the county help the people that are involved with it and also protect their property rights. And what are your thoughts about what's happening there?
Well, the fire's over for a lot of people, but for a lot of people, it's not over yet because of the recovery. And so there's a lot of, first we had to get the properties cleaned off and safe for a lot of reasons. You want to be able to have your kids come up there and kids like dirt, right? So you want them to be able to dig around and mill around in the dirt without any fear of catching any type of chemicals or anything that could hurt them in the future, hurt their health. So
like lead.
There's lead. There's arsenic. It was a real big one. A lot of heavy metals. There was chemicals that I never even heard of before. People don't realize everything around you nowadays is made with something. It's hardly any natural man-made material. So a lot of it's petroleum based, and like your woods for your mud seals, your treated woods.
Yeah.
When that burns, that leaves a heavy arsenic residue, and so the animals can get in there and when they sniff it up, they think it's candy, and so they'll get in there and sniff it up, and it gets them really quick. So there's a lot of dangers, and we wanted to make sure that when people go back up to their properties to rebuild, that it's safe. And we wanted to make sure that their properties were cleared because of their values, their property values. If they didn't get that clearance, then they have to disclose that, and so that was the intent behind it. Plus, it's a part of our watershed. We don't want it, those adverse effects within our water supply either.
Right. Yeah. Of course, one of the questions that comes up, what could be done to prevent this from happening again?
Oh, I have a lot of ideas on that one. We've run into, for the past 70 or 80 years, we've tried to save our environment. And like so many things, the pendulum swings too far. Okay. When it first started with the environmental movement, I believe it was something that was necessary. People were pouring oil on their oil changes. They were pouring oil in the ditches and just being negligent and not really knowing about what the effects on the environment. I believe today we have just probably gone a little bit too far the opposite direction, and it's got to a point to where it needs to be revised and closely looked at to make sure that it's the right thing for the environment, because we have now destroyed a lot of habitat and overgrown our forests and our rangelands by not allowing the proper management.
Well, for years, the timber companies had they plant tree farms, and then there was a tremendous movement, and sometimes based on the spotted owl. Turned out the spotted owl wasn't really in danger because it could live in new forests as well as old forests. But at that time, it was claimed that the timber companies were destroying the spotted owl, and then the issue of clear cutting, which is even age harvesting, was considered evil and bad, and then the bottom line is that they pretty well shut down private logging in the forest. And so what happens is that it continues to grow. Every year the fuels build up, and they either have to be carried out or burned out. And so what we have is a natural consequence of political activity that occurred 15 years ago, maybe even longer than that. And the question is, have we learned our lesson? Would it be possible to revitalize our private timber industry and start to reverse this tremendous buildup of fuels? I don't know.
Well, nature has a funny way of answering you back.
It did.
So right now, up in the forest, we have the tree mortality issue with bug kill.
Right.
And so nature's lashing back at the current practices that we have in California and many other states too. I believe that we should take a different approach in the future and make it more of what it should have been back in the 1860s. Let's say, for instance, right. So back in the 1860s, we had probably 3/4 less conifers up in the forest. And we had a healthier environment. A fire would take off and burn. It wouldn't get hot like this butte fire did, and it would continue to burn maybe sometimes for up to a month. And it wouldn't do the damage that's being done. It wouldn't do the damage to the air. It wouldn't do the damage to the trees, and it doesn't destroy everything in its path because it was more of a natural state. If we're going to do anything, that's probably what we should go towards. The problem is people, a lot of people, I won't say all, some people think that, people are evil in the forest. And it's a bad thing to have people and nature together.
Right.
Well, I believe the opposite of that. I believe that we are the best possible chance for being good stewards of the land that we live on.
Right.
And education, I think, is a big part of that. And so I think that's the approach that we ought to take.
Are the schools? It seems that the schools are taking the former approach of trying to separate mankind from nature. Some even think that human beings are like a disease on the planet, destroying the planet, and that's an extreme viewpoint. Mm-hmm. But that theme is picked up in so many things that are going on. There's issues like the asphalt plant. There's a classic example where what is protested and said is that the asphalt will hurt people, but it won't. It's been proven that it don't. And also it's so regulated anyway that it can possibly be a danger. So that means that there's another purpose behind this tremendous organizational movement to shut that down. And that same purpose seems to be at work at other things that are going on in our community. One is a golf course in Valley Springs that was destroyed, and people were thrown into bankruptcy because of it. And not that anything was wrong with the golf course, the fact that it was a private golf course, and it was going to bring people in. It's going to make the place nicer, which will attract people, and it's just like an anti-human movement. Of course, that's my own opinion. Mm-hmm. But there's others that seem to concur that seems to be true. What can be done in the educational area that would help young people get a better balance about nature and about freedom, capitalism, property rights? What do you think can be done to bring clarity without this rancor and hateful type speech?
I think that I think that we should be teaching our kids more about the Constitution, and not just teaching them the words,
right,
but the meaning. And I don't know if we spend a lot of time doing that in the schools nowadays. When I was in school, we didn't spend a lot of time doing the meaning. Maybe I just didn't want to do it then, you know.
Same with me in New York.
Yeah. So, but nowadays, I think that it is extremely important. We have a program in our schools going right now. It's called Resilient Schools.
Okay.
It's a great program about getting kids in touch with gardens and learning how to survive with growing their own food and they're getting involved in their communities and that sort of thing. And the element that is to make it balance that should be in there is the economic balance of it.
Right.
So if you teach folks how to do that and kids how to do that, then teach them how much it costs to be able to do it that way, because there always pencils out somewhere. And you have to be able to afford to be able to do it anyhow. It's easy to do it in schools because the schools pay for it. They pay for the water, they pay for the electric, or they fundraise for any type of materials or anything. But in reality, if you were to open up one of your own farms for a business, then you have to know what you're getting into, and you have to be able to pencil it out. It's not as easy as one would think. The cost of doing business sometimes is a little bit high, especially here in California. And so, but I like the Resilient Schools program that they're doing. I like the fact that they're teaching, getting kids back in touch with their communities. We also have to help them understand what our country is founded on, and teach them about the importance of our Constitution and the rights that we have.
Right. It seems like our taxpayer group totally agrees with that. We've been promoting the Constitution. But even more importantly, the Constitution is a touchstone on a development over thousands of years of concepts regarding a man and his government. Our Constitution recognized that there are three basic rights that human beings have: life, liberty, and property. Mm-hmm. I know we had pursued happiness in the Declaration of Independence. It had to be there that way at that time because there was a great controversy of the slave trade, and if you put property rights in the Declaration of Independence, it would kind of tie into people owning people, and we may not even had a country. Yeah. So, but in the Constitution, in the 5th and 14th Amendment, is clearly shown it's life, liberty, and property. And it turns out that property is really the basis of all capitalism and free enterprise and human development. It's like a mainspring, and it's totally endurable. It's sustainable, and so we kind of agree if the schools could start teaching the Constitution again, and most importantly, the principles of the Constitution. Learning that people have natural rights that are not given by government or a committee or a dictator or anybody. Oh, what a better future we would have.
I'd like to see that. Yeah.
Okay.
There are some teachers out there. I mean, most teachers, I think, out there do a very great job. I think that they're pretty restricted on, their what's mandated by the state.
Right.
But that's the future of our country, really, is to recognize and live by our Constitution.
Right.
If we start off that way,
right,
then everything else just seems to fall in place.
Yeah, and it's like the decades, the hundreds of years make no difference because it's all about human nature. Mm-hmm. It's just as relevant today as it was then, centuries ago, and it just. To me, the more I learn about it, the more excited I am to try to allow our kids and their kids and their kids to live in a free society.
Al, when I first started off, when I first became a supervisor, before I became a supervisor, one of the things that I ran for is because I was I didn't like the government. I was a government hater. and so I wanted to get in, and I wanted to do something about that.
Yeah.
And so, and I understand it. I understand it very clearly now.
From the inside.
From the inside. And I got to tell you that I think our government is the greatest government in the world. We have the greatest government here in the United States and the world. We just need to have the right people in the places in place to work for the people,
right,
according to our Constitution. So.
Yeah. The okay, now on the Butte fire.
Yeah.
We don't want to have it happen again.
Yes, we don't.
And so the question was, what can we do to prevent that from happening again? I think we talked on the idea of maybe keeping the fuels buildup less. There's some, one consideration is allow the timber industry to log again. Another consideration is maybe have government subsidize removal of trees or thinning out process.
Right.
But the economics of that didn't work very well because there wasn't enough taxpayers.
Yeah, and we have a lot of private property too, so it's pretty hard to mix government funds with private property.
Yeah.
I wrote a program a couple of years ago. It's called the Calaveras Watershed Management Pilot Program.
Okay.
And that is exactly what it deals with. What it does is it takes our county, Calaveras County, and it looks at it from border to border, from the top of the county to San Joaquin County, the bottom. In that is an abundance of resources. You got your timber,
right,
and you got your rangeland area. So you got your forest rangeland, and you have your basin. In all of it, there are opportunities for a program that will help with the environment, basically. The problem is nowadays is we have our government funding small projects here and there. And folks do a great job at some of these projects, and they kind of take ownership of it, and then it becomes their living, and then they start defending it, and sometimes it's not as efficient as it could be, largely because in order for us to have an efficient program, it needs to pay for itself eventually somewhere,
right,
without going to the taxpayer.
Right.
So that's how I designed this program. My problem is I didn't have a vehicle to operate it. So
right,
with every program, you need some kind of a vehicle. One thing I've learned, that's true.
Yeah.
So I brought a resource conservation district through LAVCO, and it's now the Board of Supervisors approved it to go on the ballot in June. The resource conservation district will be the vehicle to be able to put the watershed management program in operation. What that does is it takes the forest, and there is a formula for healthiness. So your trees are a certain distance apart, and then you want your greatest snowpack, because if you get your greatest snowpack, you get your greatest water resource right out of that. So you get a greater water yield.
Yeah.
If the trees are close together, the snow sits on top and it melts off real quick. The water dissipates real quickly.
Right.
And, of course, every tree eats water or drinks water.
Yeah.
And so you get less water, period.
Right.
And you also get a higher fire danger. And then that makes the habitat not as healthy altogether. So there is a sweet spot. So you should be logging that off continuously in order to keep that balance, what nature's balance could be.
So the spacing that the timber industry would use is really what was the secret that prevented these horrible fires in the past. The trees are farther apart.
There's spacing, which would allow you to have periodic burns, and they wouldn't get that hot.
Yeah, and wouldn't kill the trees.
It wouldn't kill the trees. It wouldn't put as much carbon in the atmosphere because the fires do a tremendous amount of that, and you don't get the heat, which also kills a lot of animals, the natural habitat and environment. So I know I talk a lot about that, and it kind of makes me sound like an environmentalist person. Well, I am. I am an environmentalist person.
Most people are.
But I'm also a person that realizes that we have to do it in an economically sensible way.
Right.
So if you're able to do that, you can pay for that management just by allowing that program to work.
The timber sales.
The timber sales, timber industry. And in the past, I think that a big rub was, there's clear cutting was bad, right? In some areas, clear cutting is actually good because there may have been a natural meadow there before. Natural meadows, what they do is they take and they collect the water and they filter the water, and that's a big resource for us for replenishing our aquifers.
Yeah.
So there are areas that can do that. So a lot of these areas are different,
Yeah.
and they require different types of treatments. But the goal really is to make it healthier. So if you have a tree that's further apart and there's a distance, a particular distance, then they aren't competing for water.
Right.
They're not as a big fire hazard, and they are, and you're allowing more water in the system. So that's important. The same thing can happen in the rangelands. And then if you put in erosion control techniques on the way, then you could slow your whole water process down, which puts more in the ground, and then and that keeps us a greater yield of water.
Okay, so managing the forest better is one way to prevent this from happening again. What could people do on their own property? Maybe have metal roofs, perhaps, or stucco walls?
Yeah, so my mom's house has a metal roof. They have the siding that's cement board siding. There's fireproof siding, and they sell all that stuff. So that on this particular fire, it was throwing ambers out, from a quarter of a mile to a mile.
Oh, wow.
And so they would land on a roof, and if it was a comp roof or a shingle roof, it wouldn't take long for it to get, burn up.
Yeah.
And that's why people sometimes they'll see the house burnt, but nothing else around them burnt, and everything else is good, but the house burnt. Well,
because the ambers
came from the air.
Yeah.
So and so the clearance around your house is really important. People used to think that brush next to the house and all these trees and everything is beautiful. It's dangerous.
Yeah.
So you can still have the aesthetics that you want, but you need to use some common sense on what a fire can do, and you want to prevent that. So we have about a 300-foot clearance around my mom's house, that's what actually saved her.
Oh, that's amazing. We had several guests on this program who went through the fire and lost everything. Yeah. And it was so sad. And yet these people plugged away and helped other people when they lost their own property, and they're helping other people try to save other people. Now we're involved with the general plan, which is kind of complex for most people like me, and it's kind of hard to understand. There seems to be two approaches. There seems to be the collective approach where we want to increase the amount of government control of private property, and then we have the other side, the constitutional side, or maybe free enterprise side that wants people to be in charge of their own property, provided they don't hurt their neighbors or the public. And so we constantly have this going back and forth.
Yeah, it's a struggle.
Yeah, but there's some brightness from our group. We think we're just so delighted that in our planning commission they're really studying this, and they're really showing concern of property rights, and they're not allowing themselves to be overcome by slogans. They're trying to be practical, and they want to make sure above all else they do no harm. They don't put something in law that's going to hurt people. And but it takes a lot of work to do that, and they're under fire. They're under fire for that. They're accused of slowing the process down. And what they're trying to prevent it from doing harm, at least in our opinion.
Yeah, so I look at it like this. This general plan has been trying to get updated for 11 years.
Yeah.
We are about a year and a half away from having a completed general plan. By the end of 2017, if things keep going the way they are, then we will have a general plan. And there's no way that a 20-year, and that's a 20-year plan basically.
Right.
There's no way it should take 20 years to make a 20-year plan, and that's where we are right now. It's crazy.
Kind of silly.
So really, what we've done in the past 3 years, especially in the past year and a half or so, we've actually speeded up the process, because instead of going back and forth on all these issues, we brought it to the public through the Planning Commission. You go line by line and look at each element line by line,
right.
and in a public hearing, and then the Planning Commission makes its recommendations on that. Okay. I don't see any better process than that, to tell you the truth.
It's work.
It's kind of like signing a contract, really, when you finish this general plan for our future development and for our future it's our roadmap for Calaveras County, but it is a contract with the people. And any contract that I sign, I read it line by line.
Right.
And so I'm very happy that our we have a great planning commission.
Yeah.
And I'm very happy that they're doing that.
You know, so are we. It seems like this ties into our economy. When people are not free to use their property to meet the needs of other people, that's called free market, then people don't get hired.
Yeah.
And things are more expensive. And they have to go other places to get work. And if we have a vibrant economy based on freedom, you know, within reason, then we have prosperity, and people don't have to drive forever to go to work somewhere else.
Sure.
It seems to make sense.
I think that I think there's a lot of people that have good intentions, and they care about us and their land, our land. They're frightened, a lot of them, that it's going to turn into some kind of a metropolis.
Right.
I don't think we ever could do that up here. There's just not the right infrastructure, or the means of even doing that infrastructure. So, a person's property rights, in my mind, is one of the last rights that hasn't been taken away from us in some form or fashion, and it seems like there's a big push to do that.
Yeah.
I believe that what we should be doing is incentivizing people to help them with their properties and manage them properly. Give them incentives. It's an invaluable asset. So let's help them do that.
Well, one incentive is just to be free.
To be able to.
They'll come up with their own motivation.
Sometimes they do, but sometimes you get a little older and you can't manage it right, then you need a little bit of help too.
Okay, with 2 minutes left, let's talk about Valley Springs Regional Park. What's happening with the Valley Springs Regional Park? So
that's I've been working on that for quite a few years, actually. There was a big pushback a couple of years ago, so I've been busy. And then every once in a while I throw a little feeler out there to see how it's going. We have a Foothill Parks and Rec. It's a nonprofit that's been sitting out there for 7 years that wasn't going anywhere. So I asked Jason Robitel, who is the fire chief down there at Calco, and to get involved in that. He's a part of that board. The park looks like it's going to roll forward. CCWD has 51 acres out there, and we're working on it actively. Well, thank you very much, Cliff. All right, thanks. Great program. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Calaveras County Taxpayer Association and Taxpayer Alert.